Well, hello, District 7 and fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to another episode of the District 7 PRM Forum. You are in for a real treat tonight because our guest speaker is a very good friend of mine, pretty much been my friend since I've joined Toastmasters, and we've done a lot together, and we've also set up hybrid meetings together, set up hybrid contests and events and conferences. So this person, his name is John Morrow, is going to tell us all about hybrid meetings, and he's going to tell us why you need to find a reason to move forward. So, John Morrow, the virtual floor is yours, sir.
Fred, hello, District 7. It's a pleasure to come to you from sunny but dark Florida, because as I'm talking to you, it's nighttime here in the Sunshine State. And actually, it's quite warm. I wish it was cooler, but it's not. So anyway, I wanted to talk to you about the idea of hybrid or not hybrid and why move forward, because moving forward sometimes is a difficult thing to do. But let me give you a little background on how Zoom and I came to know each other. And by the way, Zoom is not the only game in town. It's not the only circus in town, but Zoom happens to be the thing that I got to cut my teeth on when I started understanding the virtual platform. And then when we began to gather together once again, and that's a wonderful thing when you can get Toastmasters together and have physical meetings, but still the hybrid component is a very valuable tool, but you have to make the decision that you want to emerge into that and move forward with that and make it work. But there are some rules. But before I talk about those rules, let me remind you that Zoom has been around for a number of years. If you go back to 2015, 2016, 17, when Pathways was being beta tested, and then later would be tried in select special areas, the pathway ambassadors who were tasked with the responsibility of getting together with leaders across their districts to explain some of the brief fundamentals of the Pathways learning system, because it was all new and totally digital. So just as we were struggling to embrace the digitized educational program, we also had to use a product called Zoom to hold these meetings as pathway ambassadors. Little did we know that when COVID would really just strike a huge blow to all of us, not just here, but around the world in 2020, and would continue to carry through over the course of these last over 3 years, that Zoom would become an integral part, along with many other types of streaming services that allow for conferencing, for video activity, for recording, and for everything that has to do with audio and video and communicating with people, not just from great distances, but sometimes, if the club doesn't have a physical location, right within the confines of a geographical area like where I live in Lakeland, Florida. I had the opportunity to cut my teeth on Zoom. I didn't know a lot about it. I had the basic Zoom, and I knew that I had 45 minutes that I could talk, and then it was going to shut me off. A lot's come down the road since that time. And during the period of time when we were having meetings only virtually, but we were beginning to break back in very carefully, very deliberately into what will begin to be called hybrid meetings, I had the opportunity, already that time being comfortable with Zoom technology, to attend some meetings online that were hybrid in nature. And it was those experiences where I met and talked to fellow Toastmasters who had studied the idea of bringing both a live component and a digital component or a virtual component into a meeting and combining them successfully. And it's a lot of trial and error. So everything that I share with you this particular session is about what I have learned through trial and error. I've been able to apply it, And now I'm discovering that when you get it right and you know what to do, you save yourself a lot of aggravation. You get it set up, it's working fine, and you can do it. And it can be, I guarantee, seamless and very much integrated in such a way that you hardly even notice any difference other than the fact that some of the people are on a screen and the rest are in a room, but we all hear and see each other. Now you say, how can you do that with a hybrid? Well, let me give you a couple of important priorities. Fact one, if you don't have good broadband, it doesn't matter what kind of equipment you have, because broadband is critical to your success. You must have a broadband system that can support the individuals who are on the computer coming in virtually, not just audio, but video. That takes up a lot of space. And if you don't have a good, fast broadband with upload and download speeds in the facility that you're in, like I said, the equipment doesn't matter. But that's always going to be priority one. But I live by the rule of three. And here are the three basic rules of hybrid that you need to remember first before you set up anything. Number one, audio, for purposes of hearing in the room, can only have one source. Do you understand what I'm saying? Audio can only come from one source. So ideally, the audio should emanate from the primary laptop that is going to be stationed either on the lectern or on the front dais in conjunction with the lectern, so that the camera position can see the individual and the individual can hear the people online. That's the first fact. The second fact is that you can only have one microphone. So the microphone that you have needs to be the kind of microphone that is going to create the most optimal pickup possible, not just for the people at the lectern, but also possibly for the ambient sound in the room, the people in the room. And again, depending upon the size of the room, that can be a challenge. Now, let me talk about the speaker audio first. If you have a room that can hold comfortably 20 people, and an average Toastmasters meeting in many cases is anywhere from 15, 20 to 25 people. So these rooms are probably like Sunday schools or classrooms or rooms where civic clubs meet. And you want to be having audio that can be heard in such a way that everybody in the room can hear the people who are online. I discovered something totally by accident in my journey in building this hybrid that I use as the Zoom moderator for 2 clubs here in District 84. And I didn't even find it in the place where you would think to look for it, and that's where the computers and the microphones and the various audio systems are that are part of laptops and computer technology. I was over in the area where they sell Bluetooth karaoke speakers, and I found this little darling right here. That's right, it's a black column, but it's a solid speaker. And when it's not being used for Bluetooth, it can be hooked up by a socket here on the back and plugged into the USB port of your laptop, and it becomes the output speaker for the sound coming from your laptop. And it has incredibly strong amplification capability. It is an excellent tool, and it's called an ION, that's I-O-N, ION Meeting Mate. This one cost me $38. I have 3 of them. Why? Well, one of them just happens to be my Bluetooth that I use in the house, and it's what I use for the purposes of listening to anything that I want to, from audiobooks to listening to music. But it also is one that I carry with me to the Toastmasters meeting that I'm responsible for setting up as the Zoom moderator. And this becomes the primary speaker so that everybody in the room, in the physical room, can hear the people speaking online. Now, what about the people who are speaking online? There are lots of microphones. There are microphones in your camera. There are microphones that are in the laptop itself. But if you want to get the best possible pickup for not just the sound at the lectern, but what I call ambient overall omnidirectional sound coverage, you need what's called a dynamic microphone. And the state of the art and relatively affordable is a Blue Yeti. That's right, I said Yeti, Y-E-T-I. Many of you probably have seen this microphone. It's available in most big box stores, but you can order it also on Amazon, just as you can order that Ion on Amazon. This is an amazing microphone because it has 4 directional settings, including full circle omnidirectional. And because it's a dynamic microphone, its sensitivity to sound picks up everything in the room. Now, that can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. So it's important to remember that bumping the table or pounding on a table, it's going to pick it up. So what you want to do is you want this microphone positioned in such a way so that anyone that is in and around the lectern area where the principal meeting is taking place can be heard. But more importantly, because it's plugged into the computer, the people online can also hear everybody. So again, let me repeat rule number 1. Your audio must always be only on one primary laptop. And the same is true for the microphone. You must have one primary microphone. So what's rule number 3? Rule number 3 is that you must have, if you want multiple video cameras, more than one laptop. You can only have one camera per laptop because if you put multiple cameras using a camera switching device, you still can only show one camera at a time. So you may be able to switch cameras or even have a camera on a swivel that you can turn and pan around the room. But at the end of the day, it's still just one camera. But if you want a camera that's looking at the platform, at the dais, at the lectern, and at the same time have a camera that can be looking at the primary audience in the room for the benefit of the people who are online, you need to have a second laptop. And here's a quick reminder. I told you you could only have one audio source in the room. This is a mistake that I made many times when I first started doing hybrid because I didn't understand the nature of the beast. Just because I can have a second laptop doesn't mean that when I turn on Zoom, I can also connect with the audio in that Zoom on that laptop, because as soon as I do, it doesn't matter if I have a microphone hooked up or not. There'll be feedback because there's a microphone in the laptop. So you have to make the decision not to connect the audio on the Zoom that you're doing the second laptop with in order to prevent the possibility of any feedback in the room. However, the audio does allow you to wear headphones, and that means you can still hear what's going on from that second laptop, but it isn't really necessary because you're only using that laptop for one purpose, and that is to create a second video camera, a second video position. And the truth is, if the broadband supports them, you can have a third laptop and a third camera looking in an entirely different direction. Cameras do not pose a problem. The biggest problem is just positioning them properly so that they give the people online the best view of the audience that they're engaging with. And that makes the hybrid component much more personal. And you won't get it right on the first go around. It's trial and error. It takes practice. But the thing you must remember is that the rule of 3 with any hybrid meeting is 1. Only one sound source will work in the room. Multiple sound sources will create feedback. 2. Only one mic source for the room. Multiple mics will create feedback. And 3, if you want to have more than one video position in the room for the people online to see, you need more than one laptop. Now, I'm going to give you the scenario of how I set up my hybrid meetings at the 2 clubs that I served as Zoom moderator. Let me give you the simplest one first. This club meets in a room that's ideally suited for it. It's a club of 15 members. We average around 12 to 13. Plus, we usually have 3 and sometimes 4 that join us online virtually through our Zoom platform that we have available. When I come in, I bring 2 laptops. There's a primary laptop set up at the lectern. The speaker, which is suitable for the room, this Ion meeting mate that I showed you, is set up. And this microphone is set up. And they give us exactly what we need for pick up the people and to hear the people on the line. That is the primary laptop. It is at the lectern, and there is a camera also set up facing the lectern. We have the banner positioned behind the lectern and anything else that we need. And it allows us to be able to operate the meeting, and even somebody doing a presentation that has to do share screen, that can be facilitated from that laptop right there on the spot. If you don't want the laptop on the lectern, just simply have your Zoom moderator seated off to the side, but have the camera on a tripod in front of the lectern, looking at the person speaking and following the tips and the cues or whatever the agenda calls for. If there's a share screen opportunity or a PowerPoint, you just simply have the Zoom moderator serve as the producer. He does the production work. And the end result is that everyone is able to see what's going on at the lectern. The lectern should be positioned at the front of the room like it always is, on a principal table. And everything else is going to be in the area around it, because these devices pick up very, very nicely.
John, before you go on, Kathy just asked a question. How is it positioned on the lectern?
Were you talking about what? The computer, the microphone, what? The computer? I myself at that club put the laptop actually on the lectern because it doesn't serve as a problem, but it can be easily set off to the side. And the lectern can be free so that if somebody has papers, notes, anything that they're using or reading from, there's always a danger that if the laptop is on the lectern and you lay papers on top of it, you may press a button and inadvertently switch the screen or even turn off the connection. So it really does require that you be mindful. But having the laptop in a position where the individual could glance at it and see the people online is a good thing. But the reason why we put it on the lectern is because we've learned we want to be able to see the people online we're talking to just as we see the people in the room. And we also position the camera directly in front of the table with the lectern so that we can look at the lens like I'm doing with you right now. This is important because when you look at the lens, you're looking at the people online and you're engaging them. But in a hybrid situation, you also have people in the room over here and people over here. So if everything is focal pointed at the center with the laptop there so you can see the faces on the screen, and with the camera directly in front of you so that you can make eye contact with them, but at the same time your room is laid out there in front of you, you are able to do the best possible job of engaging your audience. Now, Kathy, I hope that helps. But again, sometimes it's a trial and error process. And the idea is to find what works best for your particular group. When I set that up, we have this microphone on the table, resting and setting like this on the table beside the lectern. And because of its design, it's okay to set it there because it picks up everything around that table. And it does a very good job because it is a dynamic omnidirectional mic. It does a great job of picking up most of the voices in the room if they are projecting. That's an important thing to remember because sometimes the room may be such that anyone who is speaking should get up and be asked to come forward and speak directly to the camera at the lectern so that they give the people online the benefit of being heard. This is very, very important, just as the speaker needs to be strong enough that it can be heard in the back of the room just as easily as it is in the front of the room where it's setting. And usually I put that meeting mate speaker on the table, but towards the front right side of the lectern so that it is facing towards the people in the room. and it does an outstanding job of pickup. I also bring into the room a HDMI TV. It's not a smart TV. It's just an inexpensive, cheap TV, but it's larger by far than a laptop, but it fits on the left side of the desk. And coming out of the laptop's HDMI output, I set up an HDMI cable that runs directly into the back of that TV. I turn on that TV, and now the people that I see on the laptop here in front of me are also being seen by the people in the audience. And I have the sound on the television turned off. Remember what I said? You can only have one sound source. So I turn the sound completely off on the TV, and everybody can see the people on TV and hear them on the speaker that's positioned just to the right of the lectern. It sounds complicated, but it's not hard at all, because now I know that the people I'm seeing on the laptop in front of me at the lectern are also being seen by the people in the room directly in front of me, because that TV is facing in their direction. Finally, if I want an additional camera, I actually set up a second laptop on the same table behind the TV, and I have a special camera mounted on top of the TV. And that camera is a USB camera that I plug into that laptop. I log into the Zoom account, but I do not engage the audio. I simply X out of the audio so that when you look at the audio symbol, the mute symbol on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom screen, as I'm looking at now, what you see is, instead of a microphone, you see a pair of headphones. That means that the only way you can hear what's on the laptop is if you put on headphones and plug them in. That creates a non-feedback operation, but you have full use of video, and this camera is pointing and facing the audience. So now the people that are being seen on the computer through the HDMI TV, those people can also be seen by the people in the audience on the TV, and the people on the TV can see the people in the audience because there's a camera on top of the TV looking at them. So 2 camera positions and the problem is solved. And because we have one solid amplification source and one solid audio source, we have a clean, clear sound. And barring any technical difficulties from purely a Zoom or somebody pushing the wrong button or inadvertently exiting the room for some strange reason, these things can work and can become quite seamless. And each time you do it, you get better at it, quicker, you understand it more fully, and you become more comfortable doing it, and it develops into something that can be seamless. Want a third camera? Guess what? Bring in a third laptop. Same rules apply. Thing I'm saying is that these rules work in all situations. But I do want to tell you one final thing before I wrap up, because we're fortunate in one of the clubs that I'm a part of here in District 84 to be associated with a community business incubator, which is like a work share facility. And this organization has a lot of great virtual tools and audiovisual tools already in hand. They have their own sound system. They have these big screen TVs, and these are smart TVs. And this particular location plays host to our club on the first and third Mondays of every month. And when we go in there, what we are greeted by first is a room that is already fully set up. So as the Sergeant at Arms / Zoom Master, my responsibility is setting up the hybrid. But they have also assisted in that situation. So when I set up there, 2 things are present that are not present when I set up at that other club. First of all, they have a sound system that's fully Bluetooth and wireless. That sound system is purely for audio in the room. And what it does is, since it's a larger room than normal, it creates an audio sound using handheld microphones or wireless lapel microphones if we do, and we have those as well. And we are able to have that sound fill the room by simply learning how to use microphones. Mic skills are important. So this is an additional feature that we get at this location that we do not get at the smaller location that I set up for. But the more incredible thing about that is that that big screen TV is a smart TV. And when you plug the HDMI output from the laptop at the lectern into the HDMI input on the smart TV and turn on the smart TV, two things happen. One, the TV brings up the computer screen, and two, the TV is read by the computer and provides that TV as an audio source. So instead of using this speaker that I bring in, because in that room, it's just not quite strong enough to get to the very back. But that 70-inch big screen TV has monster speakers. And guess what? The people online not only can be seen on that big screen, but they can be heard. And because we have this Blue Yeti that has outstanding amplification, and we insist on the people always speaking from the lectern, but even then we use the wireless microphone system to create additional amplification in the room, suddenly we have a far more optimal situation. Those are things that happen sometimes just as a blessing. It's not something that you can just simply go out and buy. It costs a lot of money. And Toastmasters clubs are not made out of money, and we're not in the business of making profit. But you can have a viable hybrid meeting if you just remember the three basic fundamentals and then bring together your resources and practice, practice, practice. Learn from trial and error, but I promise you, it'll get easier and it'll get to the point where it's seamless. And when it becomes seamless, your meetings are going to have vitality and they're going to be successful and people will be engaged.
Thank you, John. And
I like that question, by the way. What if the room changes from time to time? I'm going to tell you a little secret about that. Camera positioning can be everything, but usually since we have a basic fundamental system where we're at and the people that we're dealing with understand how we like the setup, and since we have an agreement also that we always return the room to the condition that it was in before we arrived, we have found that very rarely are there room changes. I will say one time in the club, Fred, in Bartow, and the Bartow Club is the one that I bring the TV into. For some reason, they had a special group that was in there the night before, and they didn't remove the tables and put back in the rectangle tables. They were round tables. And it was really a different setup. And we had to be creative in how we were doing the seating so that everybody could see and hear, because round tables create a problem with people sitting with their backs to us. But generally speaking, room problems are not there if there's an understanding between the provider of the room and the club, and of course the sergeant at arms and the club leadership in terms of having the room set up and prepared, and then making sure the room is returned to its condition upon conclusion. I hope at least that was somewhat helpful. Fred?
thank you. And Kath, we'll get back to you. Vivian, do you have any questions for John all the way from the Philippines?
Yes, John. Yes, Fred. Yes, Kath. I like everything you said. How do we help clubs that don't have the funds for all this wonderful equipment where they all have just their laptops? How do we help them?
A lot of this equipment is actually my equipment that I have obtained because I have a need for it in the work that I do as a professional speaker, as a podcaster, as a YouTuber and whatnot. So I engage these tools quite a bit for personal purposes. So I provide them as my way of a voluntary service to the club. They're mine. I'm responsible for them along with any equipment that the club has. I know that if the club does not have the resources, the first thing to do is see who in the club might be able to help, because maybe they have access to some sorts of resources that they would be willing, provided there is no fear that it could be costly to them, and get the people to do what they can to provide and help with tools, resources, and equipment. If you have a club that has the financial capability to do it, I'm in one that did have the resources. That club actually purchased its own laptop. It also purchased a specific type of microphone and even purchased a portable wireless speaker system so that if we ever did an outside meeting, we could have wireless microphones that we could project to, but we could also put a microphone to that speaker so that the people online could hear what was being said in the outdoor meeting. But that's an exception, not the rule. The fundamental question is, when people pitch in and help, you can collect a good system, and then the sergeant at arms working with the leadership of the club wants to be sure that this equipment is protected, that this equipment is treated with the highest degree of respect, and that it's understood these people are sacrificing something of theirs in order to help their club experience a better hybrid experience. I would start with that as a means of creating the possibility of adding resources to a hybrid meeting.
Thank you for the question, Vivian. And I was just going to add to something John said earlier about trial and error. I remember the very first night I set up our hybrid meeting at my home club, Daytona Beach Toastmasters. I had all the equipment, a lot of what I learned from you and from another club that's hybrid. And every time someone was speaking at the lectern, we always heard this feedback. And we could never figure out where it was coming from. We didn't see any other existing microphones. The following week, when we set up, we realized it was coming from the microphone from the webcam that the school had. So we had to mute the microphone and make sure we did that moving forward on the computer. And that's never happened since then. But now when we set it up, it's already like muted for us. So the school makes it easy for us. And like you, I use my own equipment a lot as well. So that was a hard lesson learned with the feedback, is because I knew about not having another microphone. I was like, where is this other sound coming from? So you just have to be aware of your surroundings and be aware of the equipment, even if not all of it's yours. So I can definitely relate to the trial and error. The trial and error.
Practice.
Right. And Kath, do you have another question you want to put in the chat? Or ask John verbally?
Yeah, I'll just do it verbally. Just going back to, I think it was Vivian. The one thing that I might kind of play with is, I wonder if you could do like fundraisers. Some of the technology is not horribly expensive. I just wonder if there's a fun way of promoting the club and doing like a small fundraiser, or asking people if they can donate equipment that they have, or if it's
Donations are always a great idea, Kath. One of the things about fundraisers, since we are a not-for-profit organization, a 501c3, and we are very, very protective of that as Toastmasters, and there are very clear protocols in Toastmasters International regarding this phrase, fundraisers. One of the things that I've always recommended, and I've done this in District 84, is if something comes our way that can help our club and it's being earmarked specifically for our club, we need to first ask the district, would Toastmasters have any problems with this, since we are a part of the total Toastmasters sphere, and therefore the policies, procedures, the branding, and everything that is Toastmasters, we must be conscious of the fact that we don't violate anything in our not-for-profit for a 501c3 relationship that would make us fall afoul of the Internal Revenue Service. So anytime you're looking at a way for people to help underwrite the cost of adding equipment, and in a sense it's going into the club's treasury, for the purpose of purchasing equipment proprietary for the club to accomplish upgrading and making this hybrid technology more user-friendly and more effective, it's always a good idea to have a conversation with the district leadership so that in everything you do it based upon what will meet Toastmasters' expectations and keep them out of trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, since we are a not-for-profit. I don't myself have specific answers, because when we purchased some of the equipment that we purchased at my home club, we had money in our membership budget bank account, and it was sufficient to spend about $200 for camera and for that audio system. But understand that audio system was a very inexpensive audio system, so you get what you pay for. In other words, there are moments when the microphones just drop out and then come back on. But for us, it was an investment because we felt when we were outside, it was helpful to have that projection capability. But clubs that don't have those kinds of resources, that's when you have to ask for help. And I'm sure there are people that want to help, and you want to be sure that anything you do receive, it's understood that it's being received under the right set of circumstances for the benefit of the club and solely for use of the club and club activities. And otherwise, if people want to bring and share their equipment and help pull it all together and make it work, that's a good idea too. Whatever it takes, sometimes you have to just make the decision. This is what we're going to do in order to ensure that we have the best possible meetings, because it isn't just what we want for the people that are attending the meetings, but what if guests come in? We want them to have the experience of seeing that we have our act together. And this is the other thing too. When guests come in, who come in virtually in particular, they're able to see that they can connect with the people in the room and they can hear everything that's going on. And we have really worked hard on that, and we've seen positive results because of a better hybrid presentation. Fred?
Yes, I'm asking this for Kath. She's got two questions. First one is, are you familiar with the cameras and microphones that TI offers on their website? And if you're familiar with them, would you happen to know the quality of them? Those are two from Kath.
The ones that are actually being promoted by Toastmasters, I've never even looked at. I have no clue about them, because everything that I have investigated, I've chosen to investigate it by going to places like Best Buy, where I actually do study and look at equipment and ask questions of those tech geeks that they have. And I also do a lot of research by reading magazines about hybrid meetings and Zoom technology and teleconferencing. And finally, there are Toastmasters across District 84, and I'm sure it's the same with District 7, who probably have had some excellent experiences doing hybrid and may even have great tech savvy. And those two may be excellent resources who can help you. But with regard to the microphones you're talking about, no, I've not personally encountered them, so I can't speak to the quality of them or how they work or whether or not they're a good value, how they work in conjunction with a hybrid meeting. I have no idea. I'm sorry that I can't answer that question for you.
Vivian, you have another question for John?
It seems like John was reading my mind. He gave me all the answers before I could ask the questions. John, are you psychic or what?
Yes, I've been psychic all my life. As a matter of fact, I'm not even actually here. This is an apparition.
Love you.
So I'm still going to go to the Philippines one of these days because I got kinfolk in Iloilo.
Great.
Kath, did you have another question?
It's okay, Kathy. I appreciate the questions. I'm glad you're asking.
I was just trying to think. So we're just moving into we've just hosted probably our third hybrid meeting in a new facility for us. Our last conference room before COVID was no longer available to us. So we're now meeting in a church. Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to think of ways to optimize and make the user experience, and user as really member, as good as possible. So my question, I guess, is, I actually asked it earlier, is just to kind of think through or think ahead of time. Thankfully, they have quite a bit of equipment. Mm-hmm. We're very fortunate because I'm assuming for their members during COVID probably invested in conferencing so people could conference in for services,
That
church
was
services.
yes, that was quite
So there are very large TVs and there are cameras and there are microphones, but I'm just thinking of they may move us from room to room depending on availability. So we're not always going to be in the standard medium-sized conference room. So we might end up in the so-called choir room. We might end up at the end of the lobby, which is very spacious and wonderful. And they've even offered us the opportunity to use the sanctuary so that if we want more of a experience of really projecting, to a large space,
Yeah.
we'll be able to do that. And I believe that probably is wireless. We just haven't used it yet, so I'm not really sure. But any thoughts on how we might optimize based on as we move from space to space would be appreciated.
Well, of course, the first thing is always make sure that the broadband is sufficient to handle the need no matter what when it comes to who comes in and how the upload and download speeds work. And it sounds to me like knowing them, they have excellent Wi-Fi simply because they probably stream their services to the public on worship days. That's usually the case, and a lot of churches did that. I know my home church here in Lakeland, Florida, did that, and we spent a lot of money upgrading so that we could have a powerful presence in streaming. But in addition to that, because we centralized all of our Wi-Fi presence so that our routers and equipment are centrally located in one area where they can be maintained and cared for properly, we now have good optimal Wi-Fi routers around the church that allow us to have good Wi-Fi connectivity for purposes of Zoom conferencing when we have study groups, Bible groups, small groups, and things of that sort. In that particular situation, I still think you should operate on the premise that first and foremost, you want to bring your own, as much as possible, equipment to the scene for this reason. I always say start with the simplest possible equation or formula. There's a lot there that you could access that can be considered possible resources going forward. We didn't know that much about the resources available to us at this venue that has the TV and has the wireless sound system as well as an excellent, pristine Wi-Fi. But what we did was we came with what we already had that we knew we had and had worked with. We set that up. Their technical person, because they also have a podcast studio there, came out and looked at our equipment, assessed that, discussed with us how their equipment could integrate with ours, and it was a shared experience. And through that process, and it didn't happen instantaneously, we started with baby steps, and with each subsequent meeting, things got better organized. The setup became smoother and more seamless. We spent less time setting up and testing and had more time to enjoy meeting and greeting people because we could get in there early enough, have it fully set up, functional, operating, ready to receive guests coming in online. Plus, we had the amplification and the audio in the room. The microphones were live. And it was just a great opportunity to meet people and talk with people and create fellowship. All of that is to say that starting with your own tools, I say start with the simple baby steps, see what you've got in resources, see how they mesh with what's available to you. And also, if there's somebody there at the church who has a heart, and I'm going to say this, has a heart for ministry, in so much as, although Toastmasters is a not-for-profit and not a organization that has any specific political or religious or any type of belief system, still churches are very, very open to Toastmasters clubs. And part of the idea of ministry is, if this is a not-for-profit that is helping people and equipping people to become successful as leaders and communicators, what can we do to help them make that experience as good as possible? Because that not only reflects good on the club, but it reflects good on the venue, the church itself. And it can leave a good taste in the mouth of the people who come as visitors as well as the members of the club, so that they can see that this is a church that has a heart for its community, and Toastmasters should be a part of that community. So start with the simple things and then begin to build your confidence and let it grow. And I promise you it will scale. Vivian, your hand's up.
Yes. Thank you. To segue, after you said that, I've seen some people use PowerPoint, share screen, or whatever. For some reason, they're standing right in front of the screen where it's supposed to be projected, and it's flashed on their forehead, on their nose, on their cheeks, on their shirt. Like, can Pathways come up with a pathway called Common Sense Pathway? Like, hello, can you make a statement on that and make them memorize it? Like, don't stand in front of the projector.
I do it all the time, and I'll tell you why. Because I have this thing. You got to remember, I had a microphone in my hand when I was 12 years of age. I have sung all my life in church. I still sing in church. I still sing in worship as a worship leader. 73 and still doing contemporary worship. Okay. Yes. I know what it is because I also did broadcasting for 13 years. These technology things, it doesn't mean that I'm skilled at them. I have enough sense to know, hey, no, you don't do that. Why people stand in front of PowerPoints drives me batty. It's like, it's the same thing as if you're holding a microphone and you're trying to talk and you want to be heard, but you're scared of the thing and you're holding it out here. No, put that thing up here so that it's resting on your chin right underneath your mouth. Two things happen. Number one, it's going to pick up everything you say. Plus, because it's resting on your chin and not up against your lips or directly like this in front of your lips, it's not going to pick up any of the pops from the P's and other types of consonants that have this sound. And I preach this to people constantly, and they don't get it because, you see, they're not comfortable with the technology. And they don't understand that the technology is not going to adapt itself to them. They have to adapt to the technology. Remember, technology is inherently stupid, but it does exactly what it was built to do. We are the ones who aren't stupid. So therefore, we need to let the technology do its thing, and we need to let the technology help us, not us get in the way of the technology and both of us suffer because of it. Yeah, I'd like to see something where I would say in an educational moment, people, why are you standing in front of the PowerPoint projection? Why are you standing in front of the television set if you're doing share screen? Why are you doing that? Who's going to be able to see that? It's not about you. It's about what you're trying to put up there to project. So remember, these are protocols, best practices. And let's work on best practices so that the technology renders the best possible result when we incorporate it into a meeting experience.
Thank you, John. And as a segue to that, Fred, if you'll allow me, since we're talking about PowerPoint, why do some people like to show the camera and show the audience the back of their heads, the back of their shirt, and they read their PowerPoint and screen share word for word? Why are they doing this, John? Pray tell me, please.
They're not doing their homework.
Oh, common sense again? Gee.
It's common sense.
Yeah,
No.
Vivian, let me add to that. Let me add to that, Vivian, is I run across something similar to that in my home club where a lot of people are unaware because I use a tablet instead of a laptop as the primary source for the Zoom aspect of it. And so many people forget that that screen's in front of them, that they're turning around to look at the screen to read the PowerPoint. And I said, if you want to cheat, look at the screen in front of you
On the laptop.
On the laptop or on the tablet, and just do it that way. Same thing when you're clicking. A lot of them turn around to use the clicker, and it's like John said, you have to adapt to the technology. And I think a lot of them aren't used to what's in front of them. They're used to working the floor, or they're used to, old habits are hard to be broken, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Vivian, what do you have to say about that, John?
I've been guilty of it. So the only thing I can say is that once you have it happen a few times and people point it out to you, and they're kind when they say it for the most part, nobody ever chews you out royally for it. But the truth is, what are you trying to do? Create the best possible experience for you or the best possible experience for them? Well, you can get both if you just realize that the technology should be your companion and you should respect it and you should give it its space and let it do the job that it's done, but at the same time indicate that you have command of your information and that the technology is not telling you what to say. You're using the technology to tell people what you want to say.
Right. And Kath said it's a great training opportunity for club members. And I agree. And I wanted to ask you a couple of other things, John, that our club uses is, do any of your clubs have a Zoom master?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I am the appointed Zoom master for 2 clubs, but that is a position that actually is a part of the service of Sergeant at Arms in our 2 clubs. We agree that as Sergeant at Arms, the Sergeant at Arms, since they're the keeper of all the materials that are necessary for the club, whether they're stored at the location or whether they are brought back and forth to the meetings with each meeting trip, one of the things that I do is I'm also responsible for keeping the equipment safe and sound, checking it periodically, also getting with the leadership in the clubs to talk about any things that need to be changed or fixed or corrected or replaced. And I am on the agenda as the Zoom moderator or Zoom master. And my name appears there. And for that very reason, I put it there for the simple fact that I want people to know that there is somebody there who is responsible for setting that up. And it's part of my duty as a Sergeant at Arms to do that. And I do it not because I don't want somebody else to be Sergeant at Arms. Since I have the equipment and a good half of the equipment is my personal equipment, I sort of kind of protect it like it's, like it's my child. And so being a Sergeant at Arms just sort of comes to me naturally. Good question, Kathy. Monitoring the chat is an important thing, but here's something I've learned. Since you can have more than one laptop in the room, even if you had somebody to come with a laptop or a tablet who is there expressly for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to monitor the chat, you could assign somebody that role, and that individual would actually be called upon to say, do we have any questions from the chat that came up that you'd like to share with us? And you can incorporate that into a part of the meeting as a Q&A or as an educational opportunity or as an opportunity to see if we were listening and use it to see if the people were listening to the meeting and if they caught certain things. So yeah, again, you can have as many laptops as you want to so far as the broadband can support them. But those laptops can also have an important function in helping to support the overall success of the meeting. And having someone to monitor the chat is a great idea.
Now, John, let me ask you, piggyback off of that, is our Zoom master, we found out it's best if the Zoom master is in person versus online for equipment reasons. Like if there's an audio issue or a camera issue, they're in there in the room and they're able to address the issue. And we rotate our Zoom masters every meeting. For the first 3 weeks, I was showing people how to do it. And something else you were talking about, trial and error. Something I found out is if you don't bring your own device and you use, say, in our case, the school's computer, I was typing the Table Topics winner to the Table Topics master.
And to print it on the screen.
Yes. So, and again, that's a hard lesson because they pulled me aside and said, we knew who the Table Topics winner was already, but we didn't want to tell you. So, that's another lesson learned as well, is to have your own laptop or tablet if you're going to be the Zoom master.
There are nuances all over the place. And in my home club, what we've done is we do not, if for people online, and now we're even doing it in the room, everybody's got a smartphone. So the other night, what we decided to do is the vote counter who was present in the room announced his cell phone number and said, everybody cast your ballot and text it to me. They texted the vote. And he kept the record of the vote and then announced the winners at the end of the meeting, and nothing was transmitted through the chat. Nothing. The chat became purely for purposes of question and answer. What do...
I said we do that too as a result of the snafu.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Because what happened is that doing that, and actually I learned that when we were in contest season, because in contest season, since a large percentage of functionaries, particularly the judges, the chief judge, the ballot counters, and the timekeepers, for example, may in fact be virtually attending the contest, even though there's a live component going on. Everything is done by text, because texting creates optimal privacy. And we literally turn off the chat except for the meeting host and 1 to 2 additional co-hosts who communicate in order to know if there are any problems, which brings me to another point. Always have, when you have a meeting, have a Zoom moderator that is physically in the room. But if you can, and you got someone that is comfortable with Zoom and good with managing it, assign a co-host to be a Zoom support member so that they can screen and make sure that they admit people into the meetings at the right time if they come in late. And also they can communicate private chat wise with anybody online who may have a problem or a question or a concern. So what you do is you create a teammate who is in the virtual room, and you have one who is operating in the live room.
And I have another question, John, and then we'll go on back to Vivian and Kathy. And for timers, how do you do your timers? Because in our club, we have my cell phone, one of my old cell phones, on a mount, and then we hold the green cards, the colored cards in front of it, because the light colors are distorted. So we do that and we show it on the screen. We have a separate grid for the timer, and then we also hold it up so the speakers can see in the classroom as well. So how do you do the timing aspect of it?
For the club in Bartow, where we bring in the TV and we have that very simple, basic, fundamental hybrid system with the Blue Yeti dynamic mic, the meeting mate speaker, and then a camera positioned on top of the television set that the people are seeing the folks online and looking at the audience in the room, and vice versa. What the timer does is the timer comes up when someone is speaking online and sets at the table beside that camera that is looking at the audience. And they pull up a card and hold it in front of the camera. And the people online can clearly see, because she puts the card completely over the front of the camera so that all you can see is either a green card, a yellow card, or a red card. With that big screen TV, here's the beauty of it. If the timer is online and they've got the timing Zoom backgrounds, not only can the people online see them, but because the TV is a 70-inch big screen, we can see them in the room. So if, however, the timer is in the room, the timer does the very, very same thing. We have a second position camera. The timer will situate themselves in adjacent to that camera so that the people online will be able to see the timing cues, because the people in the room can see the timing cues fine. But the people online need to have the courtesy of knowing when they hit the green, when they hit the yellow, when they hit the red. And I noticed that CAF does the same thing too with their club. It's a very simple, easy thing to solve. In other words, there's a phrase that Mark Guy uses in improv: think, but don't overthink. Now, you said that the problem that you've run into is that some of the speakers don't look at the screen in front of them. Well, that's just too bad, because if you're not willing to look for the timing lights, imagine how that's going to play out when you are in competition. So you better figure out a way to see the timing lights. I will tell you one funny story. This is very true. In 1986, it was my second year in Toastmasters. Back then, we had more than the current 3 contests that we generally have. Of course, there is really just one, and that's international. That's the World Championship. But usually we have 3. Some districts do have 4 contests, but there were contests back in my day, including advanced speaker competition, and dramatic reading, among others. And Tall Tales was a regular contest as well every year, along with table topics and along with evaluation, along with humorous, along with international. There were a lot of contests. Toastmasters paired them back. But I was at an area contest, and it was an advanced speaker contest, and they had this light system on a table that was supposed to be able to be seen by the speaker on the platform. And this speaker who was giving a speech, he didn't say, I can't see the lights, stopped and said, I can't see the lights. How am I supposed to see the lights and know what my time is? No, what he did is he's speaking. Every now and then he would be giving a phrase in his speech eloquently, and he says, it's kind of like, I just can't see the lights. And then he'd go on, and a little bit later he'd say, and then I'd find myself, I still can't see the lights. And he incorporated it into the speech, and suddenly I realized he couldn't see the lights. But it was one of the smoothest, smartest, most intelligent, advanced ideas for being able to let the timekeeper know, hey, get that light where I can see it. I'm up here speaking on stage. Get them where I can see them. Somebody's in front of them. And, but again, if a person's not going to pay attention to the lights, that's their problem, really. I mean, if you're going to be in competition, you better look for the lights.
Oh, I agree 100%, John. And it's like I said, you have to adapt to the technology, not the other way, not the other way around.
Thorough preparation and orientation preparation and pre-contest planning is essential. Everybody needs to know just exactly where every tool is available to them so that they get the most level playing field. And we always remember this: contests are for contestants. So we must err on the side of the contestants in any way, form, shape, or fashion. So when contestants are involved in competition, they need to understand, if you want to have the most successful opportunity to give your best speech and hope to be a winner, here's what you need to be aware of. Here's where your lights are at. Here's your timing cue. This is what you want to do. This is what you need to do if you're doing it on virtual. That's why we do things like spotlight this timer beside the speaker sometimes, or just tell the speaker, pin the timer. But in a room, of course, you better know where the timer's at.
Yes, I agree. So Vivian and Kathy, we still have quite a bit of time. Do you have any more questions for John?
Yes, I do. Quick question, again, back to common sense. What I do in my training, seminars, and workshops, we have somebody who can do quick, instant replay, and it sure beats any best ever evaluator on this whole planet. Because when you say your eye contact, your gestures, perception's reality. What you're saying is not necessarily getting into their brain cells. So we do a quick replay, instant, and no sounds from the screen. As the evaluator's talking, boom, you got it. And that's why you can see my screen says show and tell. You can tell and tell and tell and tell, but their perception is their reality. I would like to encourage this wonderful organization from the start to inspire wannabe speakers and beginners to review themselves on video. And when I tell them that, they say, gasp, I know I'm terrible. I don't want to see myself. And so I just tell them, well, we all have to suffer and see you. So can you suffer along with us, please? I mean, you see, John, come on. Humor goes a long way. Why should we do all the suffering? I mean, give me a break, right? But a lot of humor. Come on, John. That works, right?
I know, and but I just love Kathy, the candor.
Candor, yeah. You read my column. It's called Candid Conversations. So because you're doing this in church, Fred and Kath, let's put some funds together and make a special painting or a carpet that John can hang behind his dinner table. We'll call it, for Toastmasters, The Last Suffer.
I like that, Viv. I like that. Kath, do you have anything you would like to add, John, before we wrap up?
Sure. I guess I would like to hear more about the transition. And your two clubs may do things differently than our club. Our club, let's guests and members start arriving. We don't have a Zoom master that does not let them in.
Mm-hmm.
So they just kind of start arriving around 15 minutes before. and we use it as an opportunity to network, chat, greet.
Mhm.
And then our sergeant at arms announces 2 minutes before the meeting's going to start. So it kind of puts everybody on cue. And then we start promptly at noon.
Uh-huh.
I'm just curious, in a hybrid situation, any suggestions you have on how to make that and also how to transition out, I guess, as well. But the entry probably is the most important.
The entry is important for two reasons. There has to be someone who is always at or near the laptop, the primary laptop, the host laptop. And if you have more than one, let them also serve as co-hosts, because they too can admit guests as they arrive. We don't require a passcode. Instead, we have the guests arrive, they're in a waiting room, and obviously the signal pops up and says they want to be admitted, and we admit them. And usually the process of admitting them allows two opportunities. One, it allows them, first of all, to pop up on the screen, and hopefully their name is there. And if somebody is in the room there and the microphone in the room, that Blue Yeti, that dynamic mic, is always live. So whoever happens to be up in the general area of the lectern, we ask them take a moment and greet the person that's come in, particularly if it's someone that appears to have never attended our meeting, but they found time to join us online. And we try to do that with the same kind of warm, welcoming, hi, what drew you to us? How did you hear about us? And they might say, we found you on Toastmasters TI headquarters, or we found you in Google. We found you through the Chamber of Commerce. And we do the same thing with them as we get to know a little bit about them and get their name and welcome them and tell them we're glad you're here. And we tell you a little bit about what's going to happen. In the meantime, the same thing's happening at the front door, because our vice president membership is there with tools, including guest folders. And she's also greeting people and then introducing them to people in the room and getting them to sit with people physically in the room who are members, so that they can have a partner with them to help them kind of get a sense of, here's how this flows. This is what this agenda is trying to explain and what we're going to be doing. And at the same time, take them and introduce them to other people, depending upon who's readily available. The online component is an important thing, because too often people can show up and they're just sitting there and they're not being engaged. You have to really intentionally make the plan that before the meeting is called to order, and of course the sergeant at arms is responsible for announcing, as you are correct to do, meeting begins in 2 minutes. Everybody start to find your seats, because we will gavel down in 2 minutes and have our call to order and begin the meeting. But there is a great opportunity, because of the technology, to engage the people on that screen and talk to them, and perhaps even ask them a little bit about themselves, and tell them when the meeting is over with, we like to ask our guests to tell us some feedback of what they thought. Would you be willing to do that if we ask you after the meeting comes down to a close? And many of the people say, yeah, I'd be glad to. Again, it's just duplicating the same thing that we do in a live setting, but we have to intentionally do it. Everything about success in a club situation like this, where hybrid is a technology that can be a very useful and beneficial part of a club meeting, must be based upon intentional best practices. And I always tell people, if you want to know the most important single aspect of moments of truth, it's that very first expectation, first impressions. First impressions is everything. And you need to have people who are proactive and know how to talk up Toastmasters, who are alert and paying attention. And if you're there, engage, just as you would if they walked through the door.
Thank you, John. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions as we wrap up. And that is, and you got a thank you from Kathy there, is what would you recommend to people who are, say, on the fence about going hybrid, or maybe comfortable with either being totally online or totally in person? What advice would you give them?
Well, actually, the club has to come to an agreement, a determination. Do they want to be hybrid? Do they want to be live? Or do they want to be totally virtual? Because in all three situations, it's going to have an effect upon the makeup of the club's personality, its profile, its climate, its temperature, its very heart. And if your membership really wants to avoid a virtual connectivity, therefore a hybrid possibility, then stick with being live. There is a club that I know of that has no intention of being hybrid. They find that being a collective and coming together, because they have a strong community presence, is what they want to maintain. They want to reach the people in their sphere of influence geographically. I respect that. Lakeland Club was tremendously successful all those years before COVID, and we were live only, but most clubs were. We had to do the virtual thing, and we did it for quite a long time. And virtual was tough because Toastmasters lost a lot of clubs and a lot of members during that COVID and post-COVID period. Some clubs chartered or started or converted to virtual and decided they wanted to stay virtual. And sometimes they did that because they were able to attract members who could not physically come, but who could certainly attend virtually. So the club made a decision, because these people were assets and valuable, that they could get better things done and more accomplished being a virtual club. A hybrid meeting creates the greatest challenge. It is potentially a very helpful thing to have a hybrid, because there are members sometimes that have circumstances, and even though they live in the same town, their job made them run late, but they've got time to get home, get on their laptop, and participate in the meeting. If your hybrid functionality is sound and it works, and these people can immediately connect and engage, hybrid is working for you. So what they have to do is they have to make a decision. You can talk about it, argue about it, ponder it, but you have to come to an agreement. And are any agreements going to be 100%? Probably not. But at the end of the day, each club has its own unique personality. So that club needs to find its identity and do what it feels best for its particular group, its family, its fellowship, its collective.
Thank you, John. And any final words to our viewing audience and our members online?
The only words I would say is thanks for the opportunity to be here, to talk with you, to tell you about something that I'm passionate about. I'm thankful for the fact that I chose to embrace the technology and to learn and to continue to be a lifelong learner. I am the exception to the rule in my particular group. I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1950. You do the math. That'll tell you how old I am. But I don't live like that, because it's just a number. What it is I believe I want to commit to knowing, because learning means I'm still living. And as long as I keep learning, I'll keep living.
Okay, and how can people get a hold of you if you want to put your email address in the chat? Because I'm sure Kathy would love to hear from you, since you already know Vivian. And verbally, please.
I'm going to go ahead and type in my Gmail. I've got more than one, but this is the one that most people communicate with me. That's JumpinJohn6950, JumpinJohn6950, and there's no G in jumpin'. It's jumpin', Jumpin, JumpinJohn6950@gmail.com. And by the way, you can also find me on Facebook, John Morrow DTM, for my Facebook page. I also have a Facebook business page, I Never Noticed. That is my communications and leadership business. I do coaching. I do a podcast. I have a YouTube channel. I'm a published author. And in addition to that, I have a website, which is inevernoticed.com. And if you want to send me an email, by the way, to I Never Noticed, it's john@inevernoticed.com. And that's how you can reach me. And once I get to know you and everything, I'm glad to share with you my one and only phone, which is my cell phone. So I don't make it a matter of publishing except on my business card. But if you reach out to me by Gmail, I will respond to you. And I will thank you for the opportunity. And if I can't get you an answer to your question, I'll find somebody that can.
Well, thank you very much, John. And let me just say, as we go into our final wrap up here, to stay tuned on October 24th, as I have another friend from District 84 who John knows as well. His name is George Hazard, and he's going to be telling us about OBS Studio. That's something that I've heard of, but I don't use it a whole lot. So I'm going to be learning a lot from George Hazard himself. And John, George, and I have worked together at a lot of conferences on both the hybrid side and non-hybrid side. So I'm looking forward to his session. Again, that's October 24th, same bat time, same bat channel. I will see you all in 2 weeks. John, thank you for this opportunity to grace us with your presence and tell us about hybrid how-to, as I like to call it. I will send everybody here the recordings and also post it on Facebook and send it to George Hazard to put on the District 84 YouTube channel as well. I am Fred Bergeron, the District 7 Public Relations Manager. Peace out, everybody, and I enjoyed the session. Bye-bye.